breeding factory. Many see it as an extravagant brothel that serves as a monument to slavery, disguised as a noble duty. But there are others who do not see it that way. After all, the breeding factory women are pampered, pleasured, and can even earn a considerable fortune. Everyone has their opinion of it, but few know its true purpose. Contrary to what most people think, its goal is not to spit out soldiers for the war, serving as little more than fodder for the lyrics. Far from it. In an effort to leave nothing to chance, those with indispensable innate skills are brought here. And so, through uncompromising selection, the Mother's Palace is where some of the most powerful in Saint-Denis are conceived. Tiaan spent the next 3 days being constantly fed, like a farm animal being fattened up. But despite all the rest and food, she was still sad. Aside from her current predicament, her mind was filled with thoughts of her father. She was determined to find out all she could about him, and that information was held in the matron's office. The matron walks into Tiaan's room and informs her that her duty begins the next day. She tells Tiaan to go to sleep, as she leaves the room and locks the door behind her. It was now or never. She had to escape tonight. Once nighttime fell and the breeding factory was almost silent, she began her escape. The first thing she needed to do was get the information about her father from the matron's office. Although her bedroom door was locked, it was a simple task for an artisan like Tiaan to pick the lock. She moved quietly through the dark hall, and once she reached the matron's office, she used her trusty fork to break in. Noticing a locked cabinet and using a makeshift crowbar, she forced it open. She went through each ledger as quickly as possible in search for the one with her father's details. Eventually, she found the page with her half-sister's details, and scrolling down, she saw the information about her father. Unfortunately, the writing was so terrible that she could barely read it, that is, until she got to the last word written in red. Deceased. She wanted to scream, but controlled herself, tucked the ledger into her gown, and made her way out of the matron's office. The next step was to find thick clothing and some food. As she moved stealthily through the corridors, she heard the unmistakable voice of the matron speaking with someone else. She quickly hid herself, and as they walked by, she heard some of what the matron was talking about. The matron said,
"More trouble than she's worth, fat old cow. Time to put her out the door. She's got enough gold stacked away to pay for the wretched war, and then demands half of this new indenture. Skinny little thing won't survive a year. Hell, she'll probably go mad again in a month. Where'll I be? Clients won't pay anything for that."
Thinking that Marnie had gained some money from her indenture being sold, Tiaan wondered if her mother had betrayed her. Once the two ladies had passed by, Tiaan quickly made her way to the laundry room, and as she walked through the dark corridors, she heard the sounds of people calling out her name and searching for her. Once she picked the lock and closed the door behind her, she began searching for clothes, but before she could find anything, she heard the door being opened behind her. She quickly jumped into the very large laundry basket and hid herself under the piles of clothes. One of the matron's assistants walks in and starts searching everywhere for Tiaan. She arrives at the large laundry basket that the artisan is hiding in and begins pulling out the clothes. But just as she's about to discover Tiaan, the matron walks in and demands to know why she is being so slow. She lies to the matron, telling her that she just finished searching. She then stuffs the clothes back into the laundry basket, and both women leave the room, locking the door behind them. Tiaan waited nervously until she was certain that they had long gone. There was no time to waste. She grabbed as many clothes as she could from the basket, putting them on, so she'd at least have some warmth in the cold weather. She wouldn't even risk looking for some food to take with her. Once out of the laundry room, she stealthily makes her way to the front door of the breeding factory. Luckily, no one was there, so she once again picked the lock, making sure to lock the door behind her. She was finally outside, and the next step was to escape the city itself. Tiaan carefully makes her way to the main gate. Unfortunately, there was a guard there, pacing back and forth, mainly to keep warm. She watches him for a while, noticing how long it took him to walk to one end of the gate with his back to her. She needed a distraction because she wouldn't have enough time to scale the gate before he turned around. So once he turned his back to her, she ran into the gatehouse. There was a lantern there, which she used to start a small fire, then ran back out again. Once she was back in her hiding spot, she made a sound like a cat. The guard hears the sound of what he thinks is a cat, and on his way back, notices the fire in the gatehouse. He curses out loud and then desperately looks for some water to quench the fire. Tiaan sees her opening. She runs to the walls of the gate, scales them, and is out of the city and into the forest. She needs to move as quickly as possible because once it's daytime, the search for her will begin, and it'll be difficult to escape them. She moves through the frost and mist-covered forest and towards the mountains. Eventually, she reaches the top of one of them and decides to take a short break. It's very cold, and she wishes she'd taken some food with her. Soon after, she hears the shouts of people nearby, and thinking it's the search party, she hides herself. It isn't the search party, but a group of soldiers running and screaming down the mountain. She wonders what could have caused them to run away like that. Although there were some dangerous animals around, like the horned bear and tigers, they rarely attacked humans. Once they were out of sight, Tiaan tightens her clothes around her and makes her way down the mountain in the direction the soldiers were running away from. She can make out a clanker as she gets closer to the base, and there's something else there. Lyrinx. She quickly hides behind a large boulder. There were a few Lyrinx there, one eating the remains of a dead soldier, and another, with a green crest on her head, signifying a female Lyrinx, was tearing into the clanker. Once in, she rummages around for a while and eventually emerges with the clanker's controller and hedron in hand. The Lyrinx roars in triumph. A moment later, they all move out in different directions, with one heading directly towards Tiaan. She had no time to escape, so hid as best she could, praying it didn't notice her. The Lyrinx rushes past her, but when it reaches the top of the mountain, it stops to sniff the air. Tiaan holds her breath, and thankfully, the Lyrinx carries on. Once she was certain it was safe, she quickly carries on with her journey towards the miners' village. It took her a couple of hours, but eventually she arrived at Joe's home and gently pushed open the door, walking in. It looks like Joe just woke up, as he's squinting when looking at Tiaan. Twice, he asks who she is, and when his eyes finally open up, he drags her into his home, hastily shutting the door behind her. They give each other a big hug, and he realizes how cold she feels. He asks her to sit beside the fire while he puts a meal together for her. As they spoke and ate, their fears seemed to wash away, and it almost felt like everything was back to normal. When done, Tiaan asked Joe if he was able to get her tools and other items. Pulling out a bag from under his bed, he tells her that he got everything apart from her notebook, which Irises had kept. Tiaan checks her tools and everything was in order, but she was still missing her pliance, which was destroyed when she first carried out her experiment. Joe could see the troubled look on her face and asked her what was wrong. She sheepishly tells him that she needs a crystal to build a new pliance. Without hesitation, he tells her that he'll get her one tomorrow and that in fact, he'll get her the rare pulsing crystal that they saw the last time they went into the mine. Tiaan remembers how dangerous it was in there and tells Joe that any good crystal will do. But he insists, telling her that he'll be fine. And besides, she's about to embark on a new and tough journey, so the least he can do is get her the best crystal possible. He tells her to get out of her clothes and warm up by the fire. And before too long, as Joe slept on his bed, Tiaan fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. By the time Tiaan woke up, Joe had already left the house, and she assumed he was at the mine. She washed herself and happily put on her own clothes, which she hadn't done in what felt like a long time. She got herself something to eat, and then made her way into the woods because she had to keep herself out of sight until Joe came back home, just in case. She found herself somewhere she could hide while keeping an eye on Joe's house for when he returned, or for anyone unusual. It was a boring wait, and as the day passed by, she suddenly noticed a figure walking through the miners' village. Looking closer, It wasn't Joe. It was Nish, and his stride seemed more confident than she remembered. She made sure she was well hidden, so he wouldn't see her. Nighttime soon came, and Joe hadn't returned, so she decided to head to the mine. She thought maybe getting the crystal was more difficult than he expected. Luckily for Tiaan, there were no guards. She made her way down the mine, past one level, then the other, until she reached the lowest level, where the glowing crystal was, and where, unless he had already left, she'd find Joe. Tiaan notices a pile of rocks, and looking closer, realizes that there's a body under it. She rushes towards it, desperately pulling away the rocks until she reveals Joe's body underneath, and he's in very bad shape. She rubs her hand on his cheek, and it's warm. After calling out his name a few times, he finally responds by groaning and gently opening his eyes. She asks him what happened, and with difficulty, he tells her that he wanted to send her off with the best crystal. With a sad look on her face, she tells him that he shouldn't have done that. And as she tries to move him away, more debris falls from the ceiling. He tells her to stop, as the mine could collapse at any time. Tiaan protests because they have to get back to the surface, and there's no way she's leaving Joe down here. With calm in his voice, he tells her that he can't feel anything from the waist down. She still tries to protest, but he sternly tells her to listen to him. He asks her to remove his belt, which she manages to do with some effort. He then tells her to take the gold pouch from it, as well as the knife. With tears in her eyes, Tiaan does as he asks. She asks him if he's thirsty, and when he nods, she tries to offer him some water. An old miner like Joe doesn't want water at a time like this. Instead, he tells her to grab his flask of brandy. She gently pours the brandy down his throat. After a few gulps, and with a grin on his face, Joe tells Tiaan that he'll need some more. After all, it's not going to kill him. Joe closes his eyes and begins to sing an old song. Tiaan asks him if there's another way out of the mine, as she saw Nish at the miners' village, and she's sure they'll be searching for her by now. He tells Tiaan that on the 9th level of the mine, there's a secret exit. Although it was sealed off a long time ago, few know of it, and it's her best chance. She thanks him. He's less responsive when she tries to pour some more brandy into his mouth, so she calls out his name. With his last breath, he tells her that he has one more gift for her. His hand opens up, revealing a pulsating crystal, and simply touching it created an explosion of the field in her mind. She places the crystal into her pouch and turns her attention back to Joe, but there's no reaction from him. Joe is dead. Tiaan sobs bitterly at the loss of her best friend. A few moments later, she says her goodbyes to him and turns around, never looking back again as she walks further down the mine. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hopefully you're enjoying the story so far. If so, please like, subscribe, and leave any comments or suggestions you have below. And I'll see you all on the next one.